Hello, everyone. My name is Huang. I'm a doctoral graduate from University at Albany. I'm presenting to you today our research on refugee mental health interventions in the United States, a systematic review and meta-analysis. Our research focused on systematically review and characterize the existing refugee mental health interventions in the US. Also, we aim to examine the determinants of these interventions' effectiveness in improving trauma-related refugee mental health outcomes, aka depression, PTSD, and post-traumatic growth. Let's start with the main findings. First, most existing interventions for refugee mental health in the US were community-based educational programs or trauma-focused psychotherapies, with an emphasis on community partnerships, enhancing social networks, being culturally informed, or being trauma-informed. Although service integration and multi-tier interventions were promoted and utilized, comprehensive multi-tier interventions implementing the MHPSS framework were limited in the US. Although service integration and multi-tier interventions were promoted and utilized, comprehensive multi-tier interventions implementing the MHPSS framework were limited in the US. Our findings proved and quantified the effectiveness of current psychotherapies in reducing refugee depression and PTSD prevalence in the short term, supporting the advantage that psychotherapies had over other types of interventions. However, further investigations are needed to examine the long-term effects of these interventions and how multi-tier interventions might impact refugee mental health. To give you some background, there are more than 35 million refugees worldwide, 114,000 resettled outside of their home country in 2022. The United States alone has admitted more than 600,000 refugees and asylees in the past decade. And New York City is home to more than 5,000 refugees from more than 50 countries. Refugees have 3 to 10 times higher risk of depression and PTSD compared to their counterparts in the countries where they resettle. Various types of interventions exist to improve refugee mental health, but intervention effectiveness and their determinants were unclear in the US context. Therefore, our study sought to more comprehensively describe and quantify the effectiveness of these interventions and identify key determinants of their outcomes within the US. Our method aligns with the PRISMA guidelines. We conducted a systematic literature review on 7 databases. We included studies that assessed an intervention on depression or PTSD or post-traumatic growth for refugees who aged between 15 to 64 years. The study population included refugees or service providers for refugees, but the outcome had to present the intervention effectiveness on refugee mental health, quantitatively or qualitatively. It had to be an empirical study published in English and conducted in the US. We included publications from inception through March 2024. As for quality assessment, we used different scales to assess the quality of studies depending on the study type. We conducted data extraction, assessed heterogeneity of the included studies in the meta-analysis, conducted subgroup analyses, and used a funnel plot to assess the potential publication bias. We started with 493 articles identified from the 7 databases and ended up with 43 for the systematic review, among which 11 articles made it to the meta-analysis, since we know that meta-analyses have more requirements for quantitative results. Before we discuss the key results, let me have your attention to the symbols on this slide. The red circles indicate significant reduction in mean PTSD score. On the right-hand side, this is a forest plot. Each horizontal line represents the effect size of a study. If the horizontal line crosses the vertical line, the result is not significant. Otherwise, it's significant. So in the subgroup analysis, the controlled studies had a larger effect size than the non-controlled studies. The effects are significant in each subgroup as well as overall. However, when we look at the outcomes on depression, neither of the subgroup analysis shows significant results, but the overall result is significant. The existing interventions on PTSD and depression in the US are overall effective. However, we need to interpret these results with caution because we did find publication bias through our funnel plot analysis, which basically indicates that studies with smaller sample sizes and insignificant results just tend to be less likely to be published. Also, these results are all post-intervention effectiveness, which means they're assessed right after the intervention. But long-term effects of these interventions are unclear due to the lack of long-term follow-up data. At the end, I would like to thank all my co-authors who were also my dissertation advisors. And to the audience, let's connect via email or LinkedIn. If you're interested in knowing more about this study, feel free to scan the QR code for a complete list of references and email me with any questions you have. I'm also attending the APHA in person, so hope to see you there. Thanks.